Hi everyone, welcome to iceup's pre-departure orientation for the United Kingdom. Congratulations on being selected to study abroad through iceup and participate in a truly immersive study abroad experience. I'm Carrie Reynolds, the Program Officer for the United Kingdom here at iceup, and I'm going to be taking you through some of the most basic information that iceup feels is important to have for our students in order to have a successful study abroad experience in the UK. A lot of the information presented here are frequently asked questions, as well as tips and tricks that may make your transition to life abroad easier. Feel free to take notes, but this session will also be being recorded, so you will have access to that information after we're done here today. I'm hoping that today's presentation will only take about 20 minutes, which will give us ample time for questions and answers after my presentation. If you take a look on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a little red arrow. If you click this, you should be able to see that you're able to type questions. You may use that chat box in order to ask us questions throughout the presentation, or you can use the raise my hand feature to let us know that you'd like to speak. Right now, everyone is muted, but we will unmute people in order to hear questions and then remute them once they're done. We're likely not to be answering any questions until the end of the presentation. And now let's get started. It's important to note that this orientation is in no way comprehensive. For example, we won't be covering important information such as culture shock or how to receive your meal stipend from your particular host university. Therefore, it's important that you attend any orientation that your home and host university offers. iceup also offers some important resources in writing that you should read and reference later if needed. Specific information about your iceup benefits and obligations are detailed in your IIS and your PPAF, which you should have already received. Your IIS describes benefits provided by your host institution, and your PPAF defines conditions on which you accepted your placement. These are essential documents that contain very important information, so make sure that you bring them with you when you're abroad. We also offer a country handbook, which shows academic, administrative, and cultural information about your host country, and then also a student handbook, which is more general information that's useful to all iceup students. And these two last resources can be found on our website. Here are the topics that I hope we'll be able to cover today. First, we're just going to go over a few fun, fast facts about the UK. Then we're going to talk about border entry. Then finances, followed by health and safety, then your academics, finally travel, and then connecting with iceup. First, I just wanted to start us off with some quick fun facts about the UK to get us warmed up. The UK is a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary system. So there are three main parties in the UK: the Conservative Party, the Labour Party, and the Liberal Democrats. The UK currently has the 6th largest economy, which isn't too bad for for such a small country. Speaking of size, the entirety of the UK is about the size of the state of Oregon. England takes up about half the country, Scotland takes up about a third of the country, Wales only 1/10, and Northern Ireland is even smaller. When we found the next fact, we knew that we had to include it because UK has such a bad rap about weather. But Zurich in Switzerland actually has the most rainfall in Europe of any city, not the most widely rumored London. And last of all, the British are famous tea drinkers. Each day, the UK consumes 165 million cups of tea. A few more facts that are more relevant to your time studying in the UK. The UK has about 140 universities, 9 of which are iceup members. The University of Ulster, Edinburgh Napier University, University of Chester, University of Central Lancashire, University of Sunderland, University of Bradford, Nottingham Trent University, Plymouth University, and the University of East London. According to HESA and IIE's Open Door statistics, about 40,000 American students study abroad in the UK each year. iceup will have about 135 students in the United Kingdom next semester. Now let's move on to border entry. This is a topic of concern for a lot of our students just because it's the first part of your study abroad experience. So we've compiled a list of things that you should be sure to have with you right from the beginning when you're entering the country. First of all, your passport. It seems really silly to mention this, but it's really the only way that you're going to be entering the country. So your passport should not be expiring within 90 days of your return to the U.S. Next, you need to either have your Tier 4 visa or your paperwork that you'll use to secure your student visitor visa at the border. And a little bit more on this in a minute. We'll cover visas more in depth. You'll also need your health insurance card, also known as your IEES, that you should have already purchased. And you should also bring your credit cards. We'll also talk more about credit cards later. And of course, you should bring copies of the above just in case you lose any of these things. So now more on the visa. Most iceup students will want to enter the UK on a student visitor visa. This is for students who are staying in the UK less than 6 months and do not wish to work, intern, or volunteer while they're abroad. Most of our iceup students will be able to secure this at the border. The only reason why you would not be able to secure this at the border is if you are a visa national. To check if you are a visa national, please visit the UKBA website, which is on the bottom of the page. Visa nationals need to secure their student visa prior to leaving their home country. Americans do not need to secure their visa before leaving the UK as long as they're getting the student visitor visa. So all other nationalities, please check that website to make sure that you are not a visa national. If you're entering on the student visitor visa, which most of you will be doing, you'll need to present the following documents at the border. The most important document is the letter of acceptance from your host university. And then you should also have bank statements that show finances in a bank account that has your name on it. This usually is not asked for by the border agent, but they have the right to ask for it. So just to be safe, please bring it. Officially, the UKBA wants to see that you have £1,000 a month that you're going to be in the UK in that bank account. However, if you are an exchange student or a direct student who has already paid for housing and this is noted in your acceptance letter, you can subtract that monthly amount from the required total. Your letter of acceptance will serve as backup documentation from that your housing is covered, and these bank statements should be original bank statements, which means that they have to have the signature of your bank manager on them. The other option, very briefly, for entering the country as an exchange student is obtaining the Tier 4 visa. This is a really costly process and also time sensitive, so most students studying abroad for only 1 semester do not choose this option. This is the visa for students that are staying in the UK for more than 6 months, and these students are able to work, intern, and volunteer while they're in the country. It's recommended that you start this visa application process if you're getting the Tier 4 visa at least 3 months prior to arriving in the UK. So if you haven't already gotten it and you don't need it, it's not encouraged to try to start applying now. Here's some last thoughts on your arrival in the UK. We do not recommend that you arrive in the UK through the Republic of Ireland. So you should try not to have a layover or a stopover in the Republic of Ireland. Students sometimes do this because the flights do tend to be cheaper, and then they can get a cheap puddle jumper to either England or Scotland. But this causes some immigration issues because there's a special travel zone between the Republic of Ireland and the UK. This means that they won't check your documents thoroughly at the border, and though they will let you into the country, you won't receive your student visitor visa, so you'll be out of status. If you've already booked your tickets and they can't be changed, don't panic. But after you arrive in country and go to your host university, you will have to, at some point, pretty quickly after you've gotten there, exit the country and re-enter. If you do enter through the Republic of Ireland, let your host coordinator know, and they'll help you figure out what you need to do next. If you have any specific questions about arriving at your university and getting settled there, please refer to your IIS, which I've already mentioned earlier in the presentation that you should have already received. And you can also, of course, contact your host coordinator at your host university. Their contact information is on the IIS. Here's some quick notes about your finances that we thought would be helpful. We recommend that you bring cash on your arrival. You'll still have some traveling to do once you get into the country in order to get to your host university, and you'll want to have some versatility just in case any type of situation comes up. So make sure that you have that cash in pounds, of course not in dollars or any other currency. And major banks should be able to change that money over before you arrive, or you can do it in the airport. And another reason to bring cash is that if you're receiving a stipend as an exchange student, it may be a few weeks before you receive your first stipend payment. So you'll need some cash to get you started. You also shouldn't forget to notify your credit card companies and banks that you're going to be traveling for 4+ months. You can do this by phone, you can often do it online now, and anytime you travel out of the UK, just for a visit or traveling around Europe for some reason, make sure you notify your bank and your credit card companies again. If they don't know that you're not at home in the United States or somewhere else in the world, they'll assume that the person buying clothes in H&M in England isn't you, and they'll lock your card. So you'll have a bit of a hassle of getting them to unlock your card. You also shouldn't expect to be using American Express, so make sure to secure a MasterCard or a Visa card. And you should also check your bank's policies on withdrawing money from foreign ATMs. It can get really expensive if you do this constantly, and some banks have partnerships with overseas banks that may reduce fees. You'll also be able to set up a bank account while you're in the UK. Exchange students will have to do this, as your stipends will either be deposited directly into the account, or you'll receive a check that you'll have to deposit later. So your host coordinator should be able to point you in the right direction of setting up your bank account. Lastly, we also wanted to mention not to forget the conversion rate. It's sometimes easy to forget. The conversion rate will fluctuate while you're over there, but right now it's hovering around £1 for every $1.60. So for Americans, that means you need to multiply everything by 1.6 in order to get a good idea of what you're spending on something. You can always check what the most updated exchange rate is by going to xe.com. We also wanted to put in a few tips about making for an affordable study abroad experience. First of all, your phone is something that can quickly become an expensive commodity. So you're going to want to do some research before you leave about what your best option is for your phone. Will your phone work in the UK? And if so, what's the cost of getting an international plan? Or maybe it'll be cheaper to get a pay-as-you-go phone when you get there. You should also make a financial plan and look for ways to save money, such as buying groceries to cooking your flat rather than eating out, and using free services like Skype and Google Hangout to call home. Lastly, we just think that you should consider how much everyday activities will cost. According to the British Council, dinner at a pub might be £8 to £10, a pint of lager is £2.5, and a haircut from a mid-price salon could be £20 to £25. Here are some basics on the health system within the UK. This could be something very important for you when you get over there. The UK has a public and a privatized healthcare system. So the public system is called the NHS and is free to all citizens. The privatized healthcare system has fees similar to the system we have in the United States. Students who have entered the UK on a student visitor visa do not automatically have access to the NHS. So in most cases, they will need to see a private doctor should they have any healthcare needs. This means that they'll be seeing a doctor that is not associated with the university, and if you need to see a doctor, ask your host coordinator if you need help finding the appropriate resources. However, please note that even if you don't have free access to the NHS, the emergency room, also known as accident and emergency, is always free of cost. Please be sure to have made a plan about prescription medication that you know you will need while abroad. The best plan is to pre-fill your prescription through the end of your stay in the UK. This way you can just carry the medication into the country, and be sure to have it in the original bottle as well as a doctor's note in case the customs agent has any questions. If necessary, you will be able to fill your prescription while in the UK, but it will take a bit of work. So medications are usually not a perfect match to the medications that you would find in your home country. So therefore, it's necessary to bring a current bottle of your prescription and a detailed note from your doctor so that the UK doctor will be able to find the right match of prescription for you. They will issue you a new prescription. Lastly, about prescriptions is that mailing prescriptions to the country is not encouraged. Customs agents have been known to seize the package and you'll be without your medication. In terms of your health insurance, please be sure to read it and make sure that you know what it covers and what it does not cover prior to leaving your home country. And lastly, a very important piece of information is that the emergency number in the UK isn't 911, it's 999. 111 can also be called for an urgent problem that doesn't need emergency action. Academics sometimes is a point of concern for exchange students. You should not expect an American-style system. You will have a different strategy of studying, completing work, participating in class, and here are a few things that you can expect. The average student in the UK takes 3 modules, which are equivalent to classes, and like the US, depending on the demands of the classes, they will be awarded a different amount of credit. Therefore, you may end up taking more than 3 modules if the modules are low credit bearing. You should also expect to have more self-directed learning. Grades are often determined by 1 or 2 papers and perhaps a final exam. Self-directed learning also means less time in class, but more time doing research outside of class. One module is made up of some combination of these 3 things: lectures, seminars, and independent learning. In lectures, expect some true lecture style teaching with little class interaction, and then these lectures can sometimes be followed by a seminar where groups of students and the professor or postgraduate student lead the discussion. Lastly, exchange students should really plan ahead. With all of this self-directed learning, they sometimes get behind. If your university offers a revision period, which is the break between classes and final exams that can sometimes last 2 weeks to a full month, use it to study as it was intended. Make friends with British students in class that can help you understand the difference in academic cultures, and ask for help from your professor and your host coordinator if you're in over your head. Lastly, we want to talk about traveling, and I'm sure a lot of you have already started planning where you want to go and what you want to see. So within the UK, there are extensive train and bus systems. This is a really great way to travel around the country inexpensively. Trains are a lot cheaper in the UK than you could find it in the United States. Also, be sure to bring your student ID with you when you travel because you may find a lot of opportunities for student pricing and discounts. And also consider getting an International Student Identification Card, also known as the ISIC, before you leave home. The link for this is at the bottom of the page. The ISIC will give you access to a lot of discounts on transportation and also entertainment, such as going to the cinema. Discount airlines can take you both around the UK and also through a good portion of Europe. So, for example, EasyJet and Ryanair are popular, and if you plan properly, you can get round-trip tickets at a really, really good price. Rail is also a great way to get around mainland Europe. Eurail is a pass that you can get that allows you to hop on and off many of Europe's trains, and youth passes can be purchased by anyone who's under 26, and you save 35% on tickets, so that's a great option for our iceup students. If you don't decide to get a Eurail pass, then still be on the lookout for student pricing. So still take that your student ID card from your university with you. If you did enter the UK on a student visitor visa, there's something important that you need to consider when you're traveling throughout Europe. The student visitor visa is technically a single entry visa. So this means that you'll have to be reissued the visa upon re-entry if you leave to travel sometime throughout the semester. So it's advisable that you simply fold up your acceptance letter and tuck it into your passport so that you'll always have it with you. It's unlikely that they'll take another look at your bank statements, but it might be safe to bring those as well. And lastly, we just wanted to, as you prepare for your trip, alert you to several ways that you can connect with iceup and students that will join you on this incredible experience. So you can connect with other students through our Facebook group, follow iceup on Twitter, and also connect with our student ambassadors through our iceup blog. And also keep connected during your trip. iceup really wants to help you share your story. So if you started a blog, let us know. We may feature your content and links to your blog so others can see. And then you can also follow what our students are doing up to the minute by following us on Instagram and also looking at our Pinterest pages. So that concludes what we've prepared to present to you today. So that means that it's time for the Q&A. So I'm going to take a look at the questions that you've already submitted in your chat box, and then also if you have additional questions and you'd like a chance to speak, then feel free to raise your hand and I'll unmute you and tell you you're live, and then feel free to ask your question. I'm joined here today by my colleague Mary Catherine Scarborough, who is the Director for European Programs here at iceup. So let's take a look at what people are asking. So Carla asks if there is a fee for the student visitor visa on arrival at border entry. There is no fee. This is one of the large incentives to get the student visitor visa instead of the Tier 4 visa. I think I did mention that the Tier 4 visa was about £284. That's a big price. Next question from Jessica is, besides the ISCI, how do we get our student ID card? Do we need to log into our account and print it, or is it in the forms with our coordinator? So this is a very university-specific question, which we honestly can't answer. You'll want to contact your host coordinator about this, but generally you get this is just generally, but you can verify with your host coordinators that you get this upon arrival. It's part of the registration process, so that's not usually something that you worry about prior to leaving for your study abroad experience. Next is, if I have a contact prescription, do I need to have a doctor's note for them as well? So if you're bringing extra contacts with you, then I would say no. If you're able to take all of your extra contacts with you into the UK, if for some reason you think that you'll need to get contacts while you're in the UK, then I would say that bring the doctor's note with everything, all the information about your prescription with you. Can you go over again the process of entering other European countries while on a student visa for the UK? Sure. So, of course, check the country that you're visiting's visa regulations to make sure that you're free to enter the country without getting a visa to that country prior to traveling there. But assuming that you get there just fine and you need to get back into the country, back into the United Kingdom, it's important to know that the student visitor visa that you use to get into the United Kingdom initially is not a multiple entry visa, which means that you're going to have to be reissued the visa. That means that you should bring your backup documentation that you brought with you the first time, the acceptance letter and your bank statements. Next is if there is any special immigration line in the airport that we must go through to get the student visa. No, there is not. You'll be entering just like anybody else who's trying to get into the UK. My personal experience is that there's a lot of students entering the country at the same time you are entering it. So they know exactly what you're doing and what they're looking for. It's very easy. They ask you maybe 1 or 2 questions, give you a stamp, and you're on your way. Next is if I want to extend my stay after the semester. If it's too late for the Tier 4 visa, can I apply after I arrive in the UK? The answer for this is no, you cannot. You're going to go, if you are planning to stay for an extra semester to study, You're going to have to return home and then apply for the Tier 4 visa at that time. You cannot, this is a very important point, you cannot extend a student visitor visa. You can only use a student visitor visa once every 12 months. So if you want to extend, you'll have to return to the United States and then apply, probably, maybe in an expedited fashion, for a Tier 4 visa. Next is the question is, if we are getting a student visitor visa at the border, do we need to fill out the application paperwork and bring it with you, or only bring the passport and acceptance letter? You do not need to bring the paperwork. That paperwork is if you are applying prior to arrival in the UK. There is a process for visa nationals, and actually Americans can do it too, but we don't recommend it, where you apply for the visa prior to your departure. But if you're just getting the visa at the border, no need to bring the paperwork with you. Is it better, less hassle, to pack your prescriptions in your luggage or carry-on? That's a good question, and it's kind of a toss-up, not something we're really, have any insight on. If for some reason the customs officer asks you about your prescription, just have your letter with you to explain to them what it's for. Have the doctor's note that says it's for you, and you shouldn't have any trouble. But in terms of carry-on or luggage, I'm not quite sure. Okay, and so next. All right. Will I know where I will be living / who my flatmates are before I leave? Or is that too university specific? Yeah, you're pretty right. That's too university specific. That's something that your host coordinator should be able to tell you. There might be some information about housing in your IIS, or if your university sent you an acceptance packet, that's the information that the university is presenting to you. But if you need something more specific, reach out to your host coordinator. Their contact information is in that IIS. Do you recommend carrying your passport on your person at all times, or to leave it in your dorms at your university? That's a personal call, but I personally would not bring it with me at all times. It's a very important document. However, I would bring ID with me. So bring your driver's license, bring your state ID, bring something with you that has your name on it. But in terms of passport, that's really, it's so valuable that I wouldn't, if you're staying in town, I wouldn't suggest bringing it with you. All right, Brianna asks, I still have yet to receive my CAS, and I'm unsure on how about retrieving it. What do you suggest? So, Brianna, I'm assuming that you're applying for the Tier 4 visa. Once again, I'll just plug that if you're staying there for only a semester and don't plan on extending, just forget about the CAS. That's only for the Tier 4 visa, and just do the student visitor visa. However, if you're having trouble getting your CAS, that's issued directly by your host university, so you need to get in contact with them to tell them that you need your CAS. If you're having trouble getting in contact with them, get in contact with iceup, and we'll try to see where that is in the process and get back to you. Next question from Jillian is, when we arrive in the UK, will our universities provide transportation to our universities? And where do we go once we arrive? If your university is providing airport transport, that's something that will be in the IIS. Now, in the IIS, it might not be too specific about when and where they will pick you up. So that's another thing where you're going to, if they haven't told you outright, you're going to have to contact your host university, because some universities do provide airport transport, others do not. So that's very specific to the university and the orientation process at that university. Next question is, do we need any immunizations or pre-departure medical procedures? That's not something that the UK actually requires for Americans specifically. If you're up to date on your SHOPS as an American that your university, your home university required you to get prior to enrolling at your home university, that is enough for the UK. Next question from Anna is, you said that the student visitor visa only lasts 6 months, so if we are staying longer than that, will we need to leave the country and renew the student visitor visa? Once again, you cannot renew the student visitor visa, so you shouldn't be staying more than 6 months on the visa. That is the total amount that you should be in the country. After you finish your semester, you'll probably still have maybe 2 months left on that visa, and the UK expects you to leave within a reasonable amount of time after the last day of your classes, but 6 months is the absolute maximum that you can stay in the country. If you're staying as a tourist, if you want to stay as a tourist, you can actually do this. So but you'll have to leave the country, then re-enter, and probably explain to the border agent that this is what you're doing. Just be upright and frank with them that you are here as a student visitor, you want to re-enter as a tourist. But if you want to stay for that extra semester as a student, then it's a whole different procedure, and you'll have to go home and get the Tier 4. Next is, if I do not have my bank statement and they request it, can they refuse you entry? And why is there a £1,000 month minimum? Technically, they can absolutely refuse you entry. And why is there the minimum? Because they don't want to find out that you got into the country and then you have no way of getting home, that you're here and you can't feed yourself, that you're going to try to work to make the money. There's a lot of reasons why they want you to have the minimum. As I said earlier, it's not really £1,000. If you're on an exchange, then you can subtract the housing. If you're on direct and you've already paid for your housing and you can get that on your letter somehow that it's already paid and you don't owe it, you can subtract that as well. Have your bank statement ready. It's unlikely that they'll ask for it, but they can technically refuse you entry. That's a reality. Can students use a letter from the Office of Financial Aid showing financial awards instead of bank statements? Americans absolutely can do this. I'm sorry that I didn't mention this earlier. If you're applying financial aid towards that housing or towards your meals or towards that tuition, if you're a direct student, bring those documents that say that you are using that instead of the money in your bank account. And Colin just wanted clarity that he can't extend his stay in the UK under any circumstances. That was as a student visitor. On a student visitor visa, you cannot extend. So again, if you are staying as a student, go home, go to the US, get a different type of visa, the Tier 4, and come back, or go out of the country and return as a tourist, but of course only do that if you are actually returning as a tourist. Don't try to do that if you're staying as a student. All right, can you carry an EpiPen on the plane? If you carry on, or do you need to check it? Yes, you are absolutely able to carry your EpiPen with you, and just to be safe, bring all your documents, bring the doctor's note, make sure that it says that it's for you. Yes, absolutely. And for the bank statements that we need to show at the border, do they need to have just £1,000 for the first month, or have the total amount for the trip for the 5 or 6 months? It's £1,000 a month, unfortunately. So yes, if you're staying from January to May, make sure you have £1,000 for every single month, or as one of our participants reminded me, you can subtract the amount of scholarships that you'll be using. You'll be able to subtract the amount that has already been paid because you're on an exchange and you don't actually owe the university anything. All right, the date for my last day of benefits on my IAS is earlier than the last day of housing classes listed on my university paper. Does this mean that I have to leave earlier or pay out of pocket? No, that's not true. We'll have to look into your specific situation and see why it does say this, but it's likely that the housing, for some reason, isn't sometimes there's a disjunct between housing and academics, or maybe there's an inaccuracy on your IAS. So we're going to have to take a look further into your situation. So Allison, I'm writing down your name, and we'll get back to you about that. Okay. From Janelle, are we required to let our host university know our flight information when we're getting into the country and plan on arrive at the university? That's something that the university would have notified you about if you're required to tell them. On the safe side, I absolutely would, to be honest, and that's because you want to make sure that your housing is available when you get there. But the date that that on your IAS that says your housing will be available is the date that it's available, so you can go ahead and plan on arriving that day. And also, a good reason of telling them when you're arriving is if they're arranging some type of airport transport, then that's a easy, free way to get to your university, an extra leg of the trip that you don't need to figure out yourself. So if you have any question about that, I would go ahead and contact your host coordinator and let them know. Can the bank statement have your parents' name on it, or does it need to be your own? It can be a joint bank account, but it needs to have your name on the bank account. So yes, you need to be able to prove that it's your money and it's not somebody else's, that you cannot access that money while you're in the country. Okay, Macy, you're asking more questions about the amount of money that's going to be in your account. I'm going to go ahead and follow up with you separately since we've been over that point a few times, and then we can have a separate conversation about your bank statements and exactly how much you need to have in your bank account. If other people, for some reason, want to go over that again, then go ahead and let me know, but otherwise, Macy, I'll follow up with you later. Is there a separate iceup orientation at our host site that we should attend? There's likely a combined orientation with all study abroad students that are attending your university. So iceup may be only one small portion of the exchange students that your university is receiving that year, in which case there's a study abroad orientation. There's likely to be ICEP-specific information that they will address at this, but you should absolutely, whatever study abroad orientation, ICEP orientation, whatever orientation they have for an incoming international student that's studying abroad, please attend this. They'll be able to answer all these specific questions that I unfortunately cannot answer, so that would be ideal for you to attend that. All right. I haven't even been looking if anyone's raising their hand, but it doesn't look like anyone has. Does anyone else have any specific questions that I haven't addressed, or any pressing questions? All right. The last question is how we can download the presentation video. We're going to be posting this on the website, and we will follow up with everyone who has attended and registered for this orientation and send you the link to the video. So you should be on the lookout for that video, or that link for the video, pretty soon after we're done with this presentation, hopefully within the next week. Any other questions, or should we wrap it up? All right. If we have last question, this is actually a great way to end it. If we have any additional questions, do we ask you or our coordinator? You should reach out to, you can absolutely reach out to iceup and ask us if there's a pressing question, feel free. But the best person to ask is likely either your home coordinator or your host coordinator. They'll have, well, they're a much quicker contact for you, and they'll be able to answer very specific questions. However, if for some reason you can't find the answer, then feel free to contact iceup, and we're happy to help you through the process. All right, I guess we'll wrap it up now. Thank you for attending. I hope that this was interesting and helpful, and you're able to have some takeaways. So excited for you, and have a great time in the United Kingdom.